can be genius. It can be genius, and it can be useless. Is sometimes even worse than useless. I was prepping for a trivia night, and so I used AI to create some practice questions for me. 70% of the answers were incorrect as I tried to prep for this basic pop culture trivia competition. So I think if you use it much, you're ambivalent about its utility. We're going to focus on AI and tax because this is an area in which there's like pretty clear rules. It should feels like it should be pretty solid on this, but some accountants are raising alarm bells about inaccuracies generated by AI or discovered through AI prompts. Anita Balakrishnan is a reporter for The Logic. She wrote on this topic for that news site. She joins us now to talk about what she learned. Hello there.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You will probably, as a journalist, have the appropriate level of skepticism with any new application. Was it a surprise to you, though, that AI produced some errors when it came to taxes?
Yeah, so The Logic, we're a tech news publication, so we covered AI from all types of different angles. And what made me very interested in this topic is, as you said, tax is one of those things that we all have to do, and none of us are very clear about what we have to do. It's something that's very difficult typically to get a good answer or to understand. And so it's something that on its face, AI seems like a great solution. It's a technology that can look through a whole cache of documents and find one part of that document and make sense of it for you. And, that could be a real godsend for a lot of people. But unfortunately, it's not working out quite as planned in some cases. So this survey that we reported on from the company Dext, the software company, surveyed 500 Canadian accountants, and only about 7% of those surveyed had not encountered an
Wow.
AI generated mistake.
Wow.
So yeah, I thought that was worth looking into.
Uh-huh. What were some of the mistakes that they talked about finding? Were they minor or ones that could, represent a huge financial hit if you tried to apply the rules incorrectly?
Yeah, so this was mostly focused on public-facing AI tools. So things like ChatGPT, Gemini, free tools that clients were using and bringing into them. And so I think they reported seeing a pretty big distinction in the types of tools that they use internally that are trained on Canadian and province-specific tax data versus ones that we have access to, you and I. So things like what counts as a business expense, how should I do my payroll? Those were the big types of errors that seemed to come up often.
I started off with the anecdote about how bad AI was on my pop culture trivia contest. That is purely a function of the AI. The facts are the facts on the pop culture. In this case, did you find that it was AI making errors or finding inconsistencies in the actual rules?
I think that's kind of where the accountants are concerned is that tax, even though it is like a black and white set of rules, it is very individual to your situation and your life, and your marriage and your home ownership plans and where do you consider your primary residence? Like these are kind of personal questions and they're up for interpretation sometimes, and you need a person to walk you through, okay, this is what the rules may say, but this is how it applies to you and your situation. And that is not something that mass market AI tools seem to be very good at yet, although there are some advocates that say that it can be made that way pretty cheaply, and that's something that they're hopeful about changing.
You talked to a web developer named Paul Craig who created something called TaxGPT. What did you find about what he built?
Yeah, so his real motivation was knowing that a lot of low-income Canadians and middle-class Canadians, their social support programs from the government are delivered through filing taxes. If you're a small business owner, if you work in the gig economy, it can actually be very, very difficult to file your taxes. So this was a big barrier he was encountering with folks, and he basically took ChatGPT, made a custom version, trained it on CRA information from the CRA website. And it's a free service. He's doing it out of the goodness of his heart, basically. And so it's not perfect, but he does communicate with people about the errors that they're finding. I think there's a lot of hope for this technology, but also a long way to go in some cases.
The most obvious solution to me, knowing literally nothing about how any of this works, is that the CRA would invest time, resources into developing an AI tool. They're the source of all of these rules. What did your expert interviews say about that being something that could happen and maybe happen in the short to medium term?
So the CRA did develop its own tool. That tool was audited by a watchdog group and found to have a lot of errors of its own. So they are working on revising that system, and they told us that they update the CRA website with the specific goal of making it discoverable by AI tools. So they are sort of aware that people are using these tools for taxes and trying to make sure that these tools have CRA approved information in them, and trying to revise that public facing tool that they were struggling to work with before.
At best, we're trying to understand tax rules and hopefully operate within them. At worst, there are a lot of people who are asking questions in which they hope they might be able to stretch the definition or, find loopholes that might not exist. What did you learn about AI and that secondary quest for people to really hack the tax system as best they can?
Yeah, so no self-proclaimed tax hackers came forward in this particular story. Obviously, this is part of a larger conversation between the government of Canada and companies like OpenAI about when they work with law enforcement, how they work with law enforcement. Some tragic cases of that recently in Tumbler Ridge, BC. So, this is one part of a very large and complex conversation going on between the government and these companies, but one that still affects a lot of us.
You cover tech in Canada, and yet tech is global. Like there's no boundaries for so much of what we deal with in that part of our lives. Canada has a real drive for AI sovereignty. At least there's a lot of talk about that. Any sense for how well placed we are on AI and tax in the context of the global efforts in this regard? Like, did you find, woo, the UK is amazing at this? Why don't we just buy and borrow what they've done?
I think by pretty much all accounts, everyone I talked to, whether they worked at sort of a nonprofit or they worked at an AI company, kind of acknowledges that Canada's tax system is pretty overly complicated, that it needs to be reformed and simplified. We do rely pretty heavily on individual taxes and business taxes in Canada compared to other jurisdictions where they might focus more on things like sales taxes. So, that's definitely something that across the board, everyone I talked to was in favor of simplifying Canada's tax system, and also sort of working on these AI issues at the same time.
It sounds like, I don't know, you tell me, the takeaway from your reporting is you've got to really double check what AI spits out when it comes to tax questions. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the temptation is definitely strong when it's with some of these complicated tax issues to try and not have to pay for an accountant. But I think at this stage, for if you have a complicated situation, it's worth double checking with a professional. Maybe for simple cases, you can go through your TurboTax, but I don't think it's worth taking the risk for a lot of people, at least where the technology stands right now.
Anita, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks.
Anita Balakrishnan is a reporter for The Logic, and she was writing about artificial intelligence and taxes and the reality that it's not always accurate.